smack down with my Pokemon. And make that Pokemon combat. I'll be the greatest master.
Theme decks. The concept of theme decks are a wide variety depending on which Pokemon you use and what kind of damage you're actually trying to do to your opponent. It can range anywhere from paralyzing him constantly to poisoning him until his Pokemon knock out, putting him to sleep, or just putting a heavy hit on him, which most people try to do. When building a theme deck, those are the main things you want to think about. You want to think about weaknesses. What weaknesses do my Pokemon have to a different deck? Resistances. What's one of the strongest decks out there, and how can I get Pokemon that have resistance against it? Trainers also are a big part in building a theme deck. When you're building a theme deck, you have to match your trainers to what theme you're trying to do. If you have Pokemon that do a lot of damage, but they use up a lot of energy, like fire Pokemon, and they discard their energy, obviously you want to use a lot of energy retrieval trainers. You have Pokemon that do a lot of poison, paralyzing. If you're doing that, you also want to run energy removals, potions, things like that, or keep your Pokemon healthy and keep your opponent's Pokemon as weak as possible. We're going to go into different things that you could do to build a theme deck and to create a successful deck that will give you a lot of wins. You also have different kind of theme decks. There's so many of them, you can't name them all, but I go through a few. There's Haymaker, which a lot of the kids use constantly. It's non-evolving Pokemon like Electabuzz, Scyther, Hitmonchan. Basically, they don't evolve and they come out immediately. They have high hit points and they usually can attack with one energy. Theme decks like Rain Dance. You have the combination of Squirtle and Blastoise, but you don't use War Turtle because you use a breeder. Breeder, what it does is allows you to skip a stage, so you can go from Squirtle directly to Blastoise. Then you can use his Pokemon power, which is called Rain Dance. Basically what Rain Dance allows you to do is place as many energy as you want in one turn on any Pokemon that you desire, as long as they're water Pokemon, which makes for a deadly combo because most decks can only place one energy at a turn. So that means if your opponent gets that combination out in 2 turns, you're pretty much done for. Unless, of course, you're running electric, which is Rain Dance's main weakness because Squirtle can get knocked out in 1 turn by Electabuzz or a Pikachu with plus powers, which allow you to add damage, 10 points of damage to your attack. Basically, we're going to go over a few ways you can start off building your theme deck and some of the things that you can come up with and how to start off with it. First thing you want to do, if you don't have enough cards, you can start from scratch. What that means is just try to collect all the cards you can and start with a small deck, something simple, and every time you get cards, you add to it. Think of a theme. I mean, it doesn't have to be that big of a deal. Like I said, it could be poison, paralyzation, or just trying to knock your opponent out. Most people start off with fire since it's the easiest to use. The other step would be to get a theme deck. There's about 8 of them. A few of them are like Blackout, Zap, Brushfire, things like that. You get the theme deck that's best fits your choice or your favorite Pokemon or whatever. And from there, you start building on it. You add Pokemon, you take Pokemon out. You put trainers in, more powerful trainers. You can even start changing the energy around or whatever. But that basically just gives you a basic building point on to building a theme deck. And those are a couple of ways that you can successfully build a deck.
Put the smack down with my Pokemon and make that Pokemon combat. I'll be the greatest master you ever seen.
This is a theme deck. It's called Brushfire. It's a basic theme deck. It's pretty simple to use. It has 60 cards in it. It's not too advanced, but basically the whole thing of it is it's Brushfire. It's grass and fire. Both of the Pokemons attack aggressively. And the way they put it together is they just put simple like trainers like Gust of Wind, Grass Energy, Poisoning Pokemon. You have your Fire Energy. You have your Potion, which keeps your Pokemon healthy. Let's see, there's Tangela. And then for the Fire Pokemon, you have the ever-loving Charmander, who discards his fire and does 30. There's Ninetales, who's a lot of people's favorite, discards 1 energy and it does 80 points of damage. There's a lot of Pokemon that are very aggressive. You have your Fire Pokemon, and then there's Energy Retrieval that allows you to get the energy back because most Fire Pokemon discard their energy when they're attacking. And it's just basically like Growlithe and things like that. And then you could take this deck and you can add different Pokemon to it to make it stronger. Like say for instance, you could use Scyther. Everyone loves Scyther. You could add that to this deck. He's a grass Pokemon. Makes your deck stronger. He has free retreat cost. Makes your deck quicker. Then you have a theme deck.
Put the smack down with my Pokemon and make that Pokemon combat.
There's some pitfalls to every theme deck. This one in particular, obviously you're using fire and you're using grass. Well, one of your weaknesses happens to be fire because you're using grass Pokemon. Your other weakness is water. You have a lot of people who use water and fire together, so therefore that would be one of your deadliest enemies. There's a lot of other decks that have weaknesses to certain things. Most psychic Pokemon are weak against other psychic Pokemons. The downfall to certain things, and you have to watch out for a lot of different traps when you're building theme decks, like Charizard. The wonderful almighty Charizard is not really that powerful when you put it in a theme deck. First of all, it's 3 evolutions. It has to evolve 3 times. By the time you get to Charizard, he's probably done for, especially if you're using a water deck against him. Second of all, he discards his energy. Third of all, he's weak against water. A lot of times you don't really want to use a Charizard because you'll hardly ever get him out. And him being one of the rarest cards and hardest to get, you're usually going to be able to put 1 or 2 in your deck. It's not even worth it because you're usually not going to get them anyway. Sometimes it's better to win in numbers. It's better to have a lot of small Pokemon that you know you're going to get that can do abilities. Charizard is basically just a straight out attacker. If you take that from him, he's a waste of time. Watch out for using a lot of electrical decks because most electric Pokemon are weak against fighting.
Put the smack down with my Pokemon and make that Pokemon combat. I'll be the greatest master.
Some of the traps you should look out for when building the deck is to stay away from Pokemon that have the same weakness. Don't build a whole deck of Pokemon that have the same weakness because then your Achilles heel obviously is going to be your weakness. Also, along with all the wonderful cards that are a trap, and sometimes people get stuck with using the wrong Pokemon, you also have Pokemon that are underrated and actually are very good at what they do. Take Lickitung, for instance. He's a pretty huge Pokemon. He has 90 hit points, but all he does is hit you for 10 and paralyze. You might think, well, I don't really want a Pokemon like that. It's not worth it. But if you put him in a deck, he can pretty much stall an opponent from infinity because not only does he have 90 hit points, which means he's hard to get rid of, but he also hits for 10 and paralyzes you if you get a good flip every turn. So technically he can hold out for a while until you build up your bench to the point where you can just overrun your opponent. There's also Chancy. A lot of people don't use Chancy because she does 80 points of damage to herself, but utilizing her talents and helping out her weaknesses, she can be a very deadly Pokemon. By equipping her with, grouping her with Alakazam and using scoop ups, you can hit your opponent for 80 points of damage and transferring the damage to a different Pokemon, which makes her a pretty deadly Pokemon. Not only that, but she also has 120 hit points. And the only other Pokemon that has that much hit points is Charizard.
I put the smack down with my Pokemon and put the smack down with my Pokemon and make that Pokemon combat. I'll be the greatest master.
Now I'm going to give you a look into my favorite deck. I've never done this for anybody before, but I'm going to break it apart for you piece by piece so you can see how I put it together. And you can see the theme, and I'll explain it to you as we go along. And you got your trainers, energy removal, super energy removals. I'll explain the cards to you once I put them together. And it'll also help you become more effective in building your own deck, and it'll give you some ideas you can work on. It's also important to think about how many of one particular card you want to have in a deck. Sometimes you don't need 4. The maximum is 4 of any card. Sometimes you don't need more than 4, though. Sometimes you only need 3. Sometimes 4 is too much. Okay, so I'll put the Pokemon there. Got your Abras. Got your Kadabras. People like to build decks called Haymakers. Basically, it's a deck that has unevolving Pokemon that come out very quickly and they attack very quickly. This deck is called a Haybreaker. Basically, what it's designed is to attack an opponent at the maximum amount of damage every turn. It's slow deck, but once it gets up and going, it's pretty deadly. Your energies, you always want to use a minimum between 24 to 26 energies. You never want to go beyond that, because then you'll have more energy than you have anything else, and it won't really help you out. So you have the psychic energy, which is what I use because it's psychic Pokemon. You have your double colorless. You can only use 4 of these. The double colorlesses are good because they count as 2 of energy, and you can put them down in one turn, and it speeds up your game time, because when you play a game, you can only place 1 energy at a time. Double colorlesses allow you to have 2 energy down at one time. The type of Pokemon I use are Abra, who evolves into Kadabra, okay, who evolves into Alakazam, okay. Everybody loves an Alakazam. He has a very special Pokemon power. His Pokemon power allows you to transfer damage from one Pokemon to another, okay. Hence, if you have a guy up front, he can keep transferring the damage off of that Pokemon up front, which keeps him fresh. Okay, the next key to this deck is Chancy. Okay, Chancy is what I call the bank. Chancy has 120 hit points, which allows her to hold 120 hit points, or damage, so to speak. So basically, her job is to sit on the bench, which is your secondary backup Pokemon, in order to absorb the damage that Alakazam transfers from the front runner. Also, if you happen to get her out first, she has an attack that's called Double Edge, which allows her to do 80 points of damage to any Pokemon. Unfortunately, she takes 80, but with Alakazam, you just transfer it. Then there's Doduo, evolves into Doduo. Now, Doduo has a Pokemon power also. What it does is it allows any of your Pokemon to have 1 or less free retreat costs. This comes in very handy when you're switching around your Pokemon. What it does with this deck is allows you to move your attackers constantly up front and up back. And since Chancy, who has 1 retreat cost, makes her have free retreat, so you can move your bank around. Also, she has an attack that's called Rage. And basically what it does is for every damage that's on her, she does that damage back. So that means if she has 60 damage on her, plus the 10, she does a maximum of 70 points of damage. Since she has 70 hit points, she can't have more than 60 damage on her, because then she'll knock herself out. Okay, now that's when it comes tricky. Your trainers are the key part of any deck, no matter what deck you're playing. If you don't have the right trainers, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to win. The first clue, the first key to this deck are called scoop ups. Now remember I explained the Chancy to you. Basically what this scoop up allows you to do is use it on a Pokemon discard all the damage off that Pokemon and put it back in your hand, and then you can immediately put that Pokemon back down. That's how you get rid of the damage. So as Alakazam transfers the damage onto the Chancy, you scoop that Chancy up, the damage goes away, you put the Chancy back down, you empty the bank, it's open again. There's energy removals, which you want to keep your opponent from having a lot of energies on his Pokemon. So these are always necessary and basics in any deck. There's super energy removals, which allow you to remove 2 energies off your opponent's Pokemon, but you have to sacrifice 1 energy, which is a mere cost to keep your opponent from getting any strong Pokemon attacking you. The next thing you have are what we call item finders. Item finders, you have to sacrifice 2 cards to use this, but you can get any trainer you want out of your discard pile, because once you use a trainer, it goes into your discard pile. So this allows you to reuse that trainer. So if you need a scoop up, if you need an energy removal, whatever you need at that point in time, if you have this in your hand, you can reuse it. So basically what this does, if you use about 3 of these, it'll allow you to use any trainer card 3 times as much. Next thing we have is Pokemon Trader. Basically what this Pokemon Trader does is if you don't have your right combination of Pokemon coming out in a flow, basically what it allows you to do is trade 1 Pokemon, put it back in your deck, go through your deck, pick out the Pokemon that you want, and put that Pokemon in play or in your hand. This comes in handy when, say, you have 3 Abras, no Kadabras, and no Alakazams. You use this, you trade in an Abra, you get your Kadabra, you get another one, trade it in for Abra for Alakazam, you get your combo, then you're ready to work. Okay? The last but not least is Professor Oak. I recommend using no more than 2 of these, because you don't want to use so many oaks to where you run out of cards, because you can lose the game if you get your cards too quickly. But Professor Oak is a good card because it allows you to run through your deck. So you save this card till you exhaust all the cards in your hand. You use this card to refresh your hand, and hence you'll get your cards quicker, you'll get your combos quicker, and then you'll be able to do more damage. And that's pretty much the way the deck works. With your Alakazam, you can swap your damage. With your Dodrios, you can put the damage on it and attack with it. With your Chanceys, you can knock most Pokemon out in 1 turn. And any damage that she gets with Alakazam, you can transfer it. And you have the scoop ups, like I said before, that allow you to clear the bank, so to speak. Always have your energy removals, and also your item finders, which allow you to reuse all these, and then your Professor Oak, which gives you the replenishing of your cards in your hand. And like I said before, it is a slow-moving deck, but once it gets up and running, and once you get the combo, pretty much it can't be stopped. There are a few things, though, that could slow it down or hinder it. Chancy has a weakness to fighting. Your Dodrios and Doduos have weaknesses against electric, and obviously your psychic Pokemon are weak against psychic, but the biggest thing will be a gust of wind. If your opponent can gust of wind your Alakazam and somehow eliminate it and get rid of it from the game, that would ruin your combo, because therefore you no longer can switch your damage around, and then you would have to work trying to get another Alakazam out. So just be aware of those certain things, and if you decide to copy this deck, those would be your weaknesses, and this would be your strength.
Put the smack down with my Pokemon and make that Pokemon combat.
Let's talk about strategy. One thing is called game face. Game face is basically not letting your opponent know that he has you against the rope. If they get your best Pokemon, don't sweat it. Never let him know he's got you. As long as you keep your opponent on the defensive, that means you're on the offensive. If you let him know he's got you, he's going to attack you even more so, and that'll knock you out of the game. Always make your opponent think that you have an ace up your sleeve. Even if you don't, just pretend you do, because that can change the whole course of the game. Also, it's always good to have more than one theme deck. You can have your favorite, but always have one on the side. You never want to let your opponent know that that's your only deck that you're using. Because if you happen to play the same opponent over and over again, they'll figure out your weakness and then they'll start building their deck based on just trying to beat you because they can't. Also, when you build a deck, you want to know your deck. You want to know what it's going to do before it even does it. You have to know every card in the deck. You have to know what your trainers do. You have to know before your Pokemon evolves exactly how much energy you need on him. That is strategy, and that will help you win in combat. In combat, you win some, you lose some. Of course, it's great to be a winner, but when you lose, you're still a winner because you learned something. You learned that that person's theme deck may be more powerful than yours, and that gives you an opportunity to go back, revamp your deck, put some ideas, some better ideas into your deck, and which also make you stronger. So don't sweat the details. Combat and battling is just something natural, but everybody's a winner because it's a game to be played. Thanks for joining me. This is Storm from the Pokemon Combat Center. See you next time.